Welcome to the NOSA Unleashed podcast, where we want to expose and remove the stigma surrounding mental health by discussing real-life challenges and obstacles that keep us paralyzed and fearful to move forward. Let us inspire you to believe there is more to life than what you are currently experiencing. Now is the time to end the silence and pursue the path to purpose and fulfillment. We will do this together because no one stands alone. Welcome back to the NOSA Unleashed podcast. I'm Laura Burgoyne. And this month, we are going to be talking a lot about the culture of honor and how we can establish that in all of our relationships, because I believe it truly does impact the quality of our relationships and, helps us to even move through conflict, move through challenges, move through situations in our life that come on suddenly sometimes and also come with a lot of challenges. And if we don't cultivate some of these tools and recognize some of these pitfalls before they happen, we can really fall for the trap of like treating each other not with honor, and it can really deteriorate relationships. And so that's why Connie and I really felt prompted to talk about this month. So Connie, welcome to the conversation.
Thanks for having me.
I know that we talked a bit about this, and we really wanted to focus here on our first podcast of the month on my way or the highway, right? Have you ever heard that saying, my way or the highway? Like sometimes that's how we are in relationships. Sometimes that's how we relate to one another, and it doesn't cultivate honor, right? It is actually a recipe for a lot of strife within relationships. What are your thoughts about that saying, Connie?
Well, it basically pits us being right versus preserving relationship, right? So we're so focused on us being right, and um, if we think we're right, then we want our way, right? Because we don't want
Right.
to be going in the wrong direction, and we're so convinced that we're right, we aren't willing to see the other side in order to preserve a
Mm,
relationship. Or sometimes we're so busy with our pride, like hiding in the background, that we don't even recognize it as that, right? Like we just
mhm.
know we're right and we have to have them believe that we're right. And I think part of that drive is like we feel misunderstood if they don't believe that we're right, because
Right.
we want to be understood, we want to be heard, we want to be acknowledged and all of those things. But sometimes it's okay to let that stuff go in order to preserve relationship. And it's not letting a piece of yourself go, but that's how sometimes we view it, right? It's not letting a piece of yourself go. You can know that you're right, but you can let that go to preserve relationship. And eventually they're going to recognize that you were right and they'll admit it, and but you have to sometimes let them learn the hard way in order to like keep that tie really tight with that person. Otherwise, it could, if you're too focused on being right, you could potentially lose your relationship or damage it pretty badly.
Mhm. I think the flip side of that too also is, I could have the perception that I am right? And I'm willing to fight that to the death. But, like you said, lurking in the background is pride, right? Like maybe I'm operating from a place of pride and I know that I'm right. Like I can't be wrong in this, right? But if I were to maybe come from a different perspective and be willing to preserve relationship, I might even find at the end of the day that I wasn't
Yeah.
right? Like maybe I'm not
hmm
right? I'm not infallible. I'm not perfect. So why do I assume that in every situation or in most situations that I am, right? Like how many times do we do that? And then, you know, if we do find out later that maybe we were wrong, do we even humble ourselves and say, you know what? I'm sorry, I was really pushing my thoughts and my agenda in that moment and not really considering your point of view. I
hmm
recognize now that I was wrong, right? Like how many times does pride even keep us from that step of humility, right?
hmm And, like, it can come across as you, like, being unwilling to understand the other person. It can come across as you it as a know-it-all. And if you come across as a know-it-all, it means like you're shutting down other people's perspectives. And a lot of times when you're in that mode, you're actually like putting on a mask, and it's usually rooted in insecurity, right? Like
Mhm.
you're at that point where that's part of your identity. You know everything and you have to be right because that's part of who you are. And honestly, you're so much more than that. So don't limit yourself to that. Like, that's actually limiting who you are to this thing. And, you need to let that go and just embrace who you truly are. If you're confident in who you are, if somebody doesn't believe what you're saying, it doesn't shatter you to let it go. You're just like,
Right.
okay, and it's a completely different perspective. And so you have to be grounded in who you are and know who you are in order to not to walk into that trap, because that's where pride can lead us, is into this place where, well, I know everything and it's your job to learn from me, right? Like,
Mhm. Yeah, for sure, and then another thing comes to mind too. I often feel like, relationships are way more important than being right or wrong, and, the more I, like, even wanna make sure that my thoughts are communicated, right, and received and reciprocated and understood, if I'm doing that at the expense of the other person, then I feel like I'm not coming with that heart posture of trying to cultivate honor, right? Because no matter what, somebody loses in the equation, right? And
hmm
I don't think that if we're trying to create honor in our relationships, that there has to be a loser, right?
yeah.
Someone doesn't have to lose out in the interactions that we're having. It's okay for us to agree to disagree, right?
hmm
But there's actually a few people in my life where it's like they can't just be okay to disagree
hmm
and then move on and still maintain relationships, still maintain that, you know what, I still have value towards that person. I still love that person. I have nothing against that person. We just see this particular situation from such a different perspective
hmm
that we're not going to be able to make it to the same understanding, right? We just fundamentally have a different point of view, and that's okay.
hmm
And we don't have to agree in relationships to be honoring. And that's probably tough sometimes, right? When, especially if you feel like, well, I am right and they need to see it from my point of view and push that side of it. Well, the risk is that we damage relationship
hmm
and potentially, you know, have no relationship over the long term if we continue to do that repeatedly. And, it leads us to a question: how important is being right? Is it worth losing relationships over?
hmm Well, and is it like, that also brings to me my mind the question, what hill are you going to die on, right? Like,
Mhm.
because if you're talking about like your entire relationship, eventually it will die if you are constantly in conflict, because you have to have some positive moments. If it's always conflict and you never have peace,
Mhm.
it's really hard to maintain that relationship. So sometimes it's important what hill you're going to die on. What battles are you really going to pick? Because sometimes you do need to hold your ground, but you need to be careful that it's not your mentality going in. Like, if you're actually right and you have proof behind it, and choosing the wrong thing is going to harm your family, and you're having this debate with your husband, that might be a hill you have to push, because it's about the security of your entire family. It's not just about you and that person anymore. And so in
Right.
cases like that, that might be a battle you need to fight. But for other things, if it's just like, I chose navy blue curtains instead of black, okay, let it go, right? it really depends on the battle, and so you need to know and be aware of what you're actually fighting for, and making sure that the battles that you keep fighting are the ones that are actually gonna help your family and help that relationship down the road, even if the person can't see it. Those are the battles
Mhm.
you fight, and you fight them with that purpose in mind, not the purpose of, "I have to be right." It's the purpose of, "No, we need to do this to preserve our family."
Right.
And if you go in with the right heart, it's a whole different story. Um, at the end of the day, it's about loving your person, loving your person in your relationship, whoever that might be. If it's a friend, if it's family, you need to love the person. And that's where honor comes from. Like love and honor go hand in hand,
Mhm.
and it's important to know that honoring is actually a part of loving that person. And when one of those is weak, you can use the other one to bolster it up and build it up. And it's pretty cool to do that, right? Like if you're not feeling very loving towards somebody, if you honor them, it can bring those loving feelings back, right? Or if you're not feeling like you want to honor this person, but you start thinking about how much you love them, all of a sudden it's easier to honor them in those moments. And it's cool how it has a symbiotic relationship.
Absolutely. Well, I think we've learned a hard lesson. I think honestly, this is maybe a topic that, you know, it's gonna take a lot of introspection, right? And being honest with ourselves to say, like, am I doing this?
Hmm.
Right? Do I do this in relationship? And maybe I don't do it in all relationships, right? Maybe some people I have absolutely no problem, you know, moving on from things and still maintaining honor, whereas there's other relationships where it's just like, I seem to like really stand my ground and, fight to the death. And why? Like, what is the difference with that relationship, and why? And a lot of times, sometimes it comes down to trust.
Hmm.
Sometimes maybe I've been hurt in the past, but, being honest with yourself and looking at those things, and then, when you recognize maybe what the deeper root is, like, then how can I shift that so that I can actually be in this relationship and come from a place of honor and come from a place of, um, really seeing that other person, hearing them, and coming from a perspective of, like you said, Connie, love, right? And so I know on our next podcast, we want to talk a little bit more about the concept of the culture of honor with love. And so I think this is a really great place for us to stop for today. And we just say, join us back next time on the NOSA Unleashed podcast. And if you need any supports in the meantime, feel free to check out all of our resources on our website at nosafoundation.com. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.